All right, all right, all right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm James Oliver Jr., co-founder, well, not co-founder, founder of Parentpreneur Foundation. I got so much stuff going on. Co-founded is founder that I can't keep up with it all, yo. So anyway, founded of Parentpreneur Foundation, which empowers Black parentpreneurs so they can leave a legacy, so we can leave a legacy for our beautiful Black children. And today, I'm really excited to have this conversation with longtime member. Well, you've been hanging with us for a minute. I think you were one of our original grantees, perhaps back in 2020 or 2021. Elle Cole, who is a sickle cell advocate, and we're here to talk about that and the work she's doing. Welcome, Elle. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I am a part of the founding members because I've been in the group since 2020.
Yeah, we started in 2020. I'm pretty sure you got a grant from us back then,
Yes,
right? That was amazing. So thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate you, and I just always see you going so hard in the paint for as a sickle cell advocate. And I just wanted to have the conversation with you about what that is, why you do it, how you do it. Let's just jump right into it. Like, what is sickle cell, please, for those who don't know?
absolutely. So sickle cell is the most common genetic disorder in the world. And it is a genetic disease, which means that both parents have to pass down a trait in order for the offspring to get it. So let me kind of explain that a little better. So in my case, I have sickle cell trait, which is the S trait. And my husband also has sickle cell trait, which is the S trait. But we don't call it sickle cell anemia anymore because if the S trait mixes with some of the other hemoglobinopathies like hemoglobin C, hemoglobin D, hemoglobin E, and so forth, there's many different types of hemoglobinopathies. But if those different mutations mix with a sickle cell gene, which is the S trait, they all produce a form of sickle cell disease. And so I mentioned that I have sickle cell trait. My husband and I met in college. We didn't know that either one of us had sickle cell trait when we met in college. But when I was expecting, I found out I was expecting twins like you, James, and I was
Yeah.
super excited. But about the 20-week appointment, we found out that we both were trait carriers and we had 1 in 4 chance of having a child with sickle cell disease. When I gave birth, it was confirmed that one of my twins has sickle cell SS. So she inherited the S trait from me and the S trait from her dad. And so she does have sickle cell disease. I mentioned that I have twins, but only one has the disease. My other daughter actually has sickle cell trait. So she inherited one A trait, one A gene and an S gene. So because they're fraternal twins, they don't have the same genetic makeup. And that's why one twin has it and the other twin does not.
Wow. Okay. And so you said it's very common. Is there any group of people that it commonly primarily impacts?
So yes, it primarily impacts African American, Black people. So not just African Americans. Let me kind of explain. It is believed that the sickle cell trait mutated because of malaria. So anywhere that malaria is prevalent, the sickle cell trait was supposed to make it harder for a person to get malaria. But what happened is over time, when two people with that same trait, when they procreated together, then you have different complications. And those complications is not just a pain crisis. I know in our community, we talk about the excruciating pain, and that is terrible. But your red blood cells, which is what sickle cell affects, it affects a person's red blood cells, and the red blood cells are responsible for carrying oxygen throughout the entire body. And so if all of your organs and all the different parts of your body need oxygen and your red blood cells have been compromised and are not the way they're supposed to be, you can have complications anywhere in the body. So a lot of my friends have AVN. AVN stands for avascular necrosis, which can cause bone death because our bones need oxygen. It can cause retinopathy, which is you can have like a sickle cell pain crisis in your eye. It can cause that retina to detach. It can cause blindness. It can cause organ failure anywhere in the body. And often people are at risk of having a stroke, and that is true in children as well. And so for pediatric patients, they are encouraged to get what is called a transcranial Doppler test, which is just like an ultrasound that a mom has on a newborn, and they test the blood flow in the brain to see if that child is at risk of stroke. But a person can also have what is called silent stroke. So there are really a litany of different complications, but sickle cell is a progressive disease, so it can get worse as a person ages. And just recently, on December 8th, 2023, the FDA approved gene therapy here in the US, which is pretty life-changing, and it was groundbreaking news in our community because gene therapy is a transformative treatment. And what I mean by that is they actually edit a person's DNA in order to really stop those cells from sickling. It actually turns back on the fetal hemoglobin, which is the hemoglobin you get from your parents, and that deters a person from having as many crises. So gene therapy is new. We're very hopeful about it, but we don't really know the long-term effects, but it is looking very promising.
So that was, excuse me, I'm so glad you brought that up. That was my next question. Are there any promising medical treatments on the horizon for people living with sickle cell? So that sounds like that's a big one.
That is huge. It is huge. But I want to say we are still looking for other treatments. And that's because while gene therapy is great, it's really not for all patients. So just to give you just a bit of an understanding about gene therapy in sickle cell patients, I mentioned that it can get progressively worse. So
Mhm.
something like gene therapy is going to be better before that person has a lot of organ damage. So if sickle cell has already wreaked havoc on the body, gene therapy doesn't reverse any complications. It will just help stop future complications. So the earlier somebody gets that treatment, the better. And so what we're hoping in the community is that they will create a treatment that actually treats the excruciating pain that sickle cell patients have. Because right now, they often have to receive medicines such as opioids, which we all know about the opioid crisis, and
Terrible.
that's what they're using to treat the pain. But we want better options. And gene therapy right now, the cost is like 2 million to 3 million. There were two types of gene therapy that were approved,
Yeah,
and
who can
they're very
afford that?
costly. Now, it is not expected that the person who is living with the disease pays that whole amount. They're thinking that the insurance and hoping that insurances will pay for it. Just last week, the New York Times did an article about the first commercial patient who received gene therapy and the insurance is paying it. I don't know what the out-of-pocket costs are for the
Hmm.
family,
That's
because
going to be
if you
huge,
have
right?
private insurance like I do, we still pay a lot of copays. So,
Yeah, it's going to be
um,
a lot, probably.
yeah.
Well, it's like I see you all the time on LinkedIn. You go really hard on LinkedIn with the work you're doing. And it's one thing to see you doing that and then see you come here and listen to you talk just so just like credibly and like passionately about this work. It's really kind of cool to see you up close in person doing that. So what inspired you? I know you mentioned your daughter has sickle cell. The question is, what inspired you to become a sickle cell advocate the way that you are? Because a lot of people are dealing with it or have children with it, but they're not out in these streets the way you are, going hard in the pain.
I feel like when I found out that I was a trait carrier, that I had been robbed of my choices, to be very honest with you, because here we are in the US, we have newborn screening. So that means all children in the United States are tested at birth. You find out whether or not you're a trait carrier, but nobody ever told my family, nobody ever told my husband's family that we were carriers. And so we weren't able to make that informed choice on whether or not this is what we want our future to be. And I feel like there are genes in our, genetic makeup that we should be aware of, because what we don't know can in fact hurt us or hurt our offspring. And so for me, it's very personal, because I feel like if I can tell somebody else to maybe go through genetic counseling, and if I could give another family hope, because once you hear, oh, my child has this diagnosis, it's a lifelong chronic illness, many people feel like their hopes and dreams have been lost for themselves and for their children. And it does impact your work situation. So I am an entrepreneur because I had to leave corporate America and have a flexible way to make income. And so I decided, why not take all of that passion, all of that energy, and the drive that I have to teach other people to make life better for, my children, but also other generations. And so that is really where the passion comes from. But also, I feel like as Black people here in America, we have been robbed of many things. And I feel like health equity is something that is a real issue. And I feel like we as a people haven't done a good job of erasing stigma and shame when it comes to genetic diseases. And I said, I can't hide my truth under a bushel. I cannot stand and be honest and authentic if I'm not talking about what's really in our genes. And I feel like if I'm able to do that and show hope, because my daughter is living well, we're living well. I mean, sure, there are some challenging times and challenging days, but we are in control of the life we want to live. And I want other families to know that, hey, you may face adversity like having a child with a chronic illness, but there's so many things that you can do to change the outcome of how you want your life and your children's life to be.
Yeah, so this is really serious. Um, so you made a comment about you feel like you were robbed. I think that's the word you used, maybe. So if you would you have made different choices if you knew that both you and your husband had the S trait in advance?
I can honestly say yes. My husband
Wow.
and I talk about it, but I think, to me, so I've also made the decision not to have any more children. I only have the one set of twins, because to me, I didn't feel comfortable taking that risk and having other children who may have sickle cell disease, because I know how devastating the disease can be. Although we do have great advances, it's not something I would want anybody to endure.
So I'm a three-time founder now, and before I started my first startup, which was We Montage, um, I was helping a friend of mine from college, at the Morehouse. Um, he was doing a film production company, and I was helping him try to get that off the ground. And he had sickle cell, and it's like I was just going through some old pictures this week, and I saw a picture. 'Cause I was showing my wife some of these old pictures because I've been over here, losing weight, trying to get skinny. And I was like, this is a picture, and I want to get back to that weight. But in the picture was my buddy Jonathan, and Jonathan just like abruptly and unexpectedly, well, it wasn't unexpected, but he abruptly passed away. This was back in 2011. And I remember he used to go so hard in the paint. He was working so hard trying to get this done. And he told me one time, he said, you don't understand that the average life expectancy for a person with sickle cell was 42 or 43 or something like that. And that's about when he made his transition. So this is like deadly serious. This is not a game or a joke.
Absolutely. And my condolences. I will say, since being a part of this community, I've seen so many young people pass away who were inspirational to me, and why I continue to go hard as an advocate. And just last month, three of my fellow advocates passed away. It is something that we live with in this community, but I feel like in our Black community, we have to do a better job about speaking up about it, because it is estimated that by 2030, that number is going to increase. The number of people diagnosed with sickle cell disease is going to increase by like 30%. And why is that? Because we as a community haven't necessarily done our job to educate everybody about it. And one of the things that the Black Panthers did was test people, tell them whether or not
Oh,
they had
wow.
sickle cell trait. And so the life that a person who has sickle cell lives, it can be devastating. And you know that firsthand. But what I can say is my friends who I've met in this sickle cell community, they are extremely talented, very intelligent, just some incredibly amazing people. And they often work through the pain. And often, when they have a traditional job doesn't really understand, what do you mean? Okay, you have sickle cell. Why are you out for weeks at a time in the hospital? Like, it is truly misunderstood.
Okay, so this dovetails nicely into my next question, which I think you have sort of answered. What dent are you hoping to make in the universe, through your work?
So with my books, and I'm just going to show the very first book. Oh, I have my,
Yeah, if you put it right up to the camera, it might show it. But if
yeah,
it's
I'm
off to
going
the
to turn the
side,
blur off.
okay.
So this is one of my books. It's a very simple book, but it's ABCs of sickle cell disease. I wrote it when my daughter was 5, after she had her very first crisis. And what I've done with the book is really helped parents understand it, because the caregivers often, a lot of times, they don't have the disease themselves, and they're really trying to play catch up to understand what it is. But I didn't want them to just feel like sickle cell was a death sentence, because I want to be very honest with people. It can be hard, but there are things that you can do to partner with your healthcare team to live a better life. And as people of color, there are things that we can do about our diet. There are just different things that help us live better, and that's true even if you have a chronic illness. And so that's really why I write books. I have published over 12 different books now, and each year I have a caregiver conference to educate families, not just the parents themselves, but friends, siblings, because really, to get through this, you need a support system. You need a strong group of people around you that are
Hmm.
really feeding in and nourishing your soul. And I'm saying that because seeing your loved one in pain it's crippling. And as a parent, you can feel so much guilt that you retreat and don't want anybody to know about it. I have friends who have had sickle cell all of their lives, but their parents didn't tell them when they were little because they didn't want them to know. And I feel like we have to
Wait,
change
that's
the
kind
way
of
this thing
crazy.
is.
That sounds crazy.
It's
Like,
not what I would do, but it is what some people have done, because and I want to just kind of set the framework. I'm an African American person and I'm talking about it, but I have met some of my brothers and sisters in other countries who it's so much stigma surrounds it by having a genetic disorder and by having sickle cell, that the children are sometimes abandoned. When I first started working in advocacy and I created my Facebook page, I got a message from somebody in Africa, and they were saying that the children who are diagnosed early on are abandoned, many of them, because their family, like, you have to pay for schooling, you have to pay in cash for, medical needs, and they saw it as a curse. And so often, even here in America, I've met different people where they've disclosed to me that they have sickle cell disease, but they would never tell other people because the stigma still exists. And to me, it's not something that I want to be ashamed of. I want to educate people and make sure that I'm helping others understand we do have choices. This is how we can change things. I just don't feel good about hearing that people are hiding their truth because of something like this. And I feel like we have to really embrace our community in a positive way to make sure that we're educating other people about it. And so that's my hope. I do want to live in a world where one day children are able to receive a procedure and never have it, or just not get it because people are informed. So I do hope to see a day where the disease is eradicated. I do believe that that is a possibility with science, and I'm hopeful. But I know in the meantime, I need to continue to write, continue to advocate, to speak out. I've sold over 4,000 books. Alone, just my children's books. And I know that that's, me as self a self-publishing author, and I sell most of my books to hospitals around the world. So I get a lot of orders from, different hospitals. And I know that it's important. My book has been translated into Spanish and French. And actually, with the grant that I got, that's what I talked about using it for. And I was, in fact, able to
Wow,
do that. And so
that's
I thank
amazing.
you for being a part of that. And I want to, you haven't asked this question, but I want to share this because one of the takeaways for me being a part of this group was when you started to um, really promote therapy.
Mm,
And I want to talk about that because this is National Mental Health Awareness Month. And
hmm.
as you can imagine, having a child with a chronic illness, even though I'm a positive advocate, you see me showing up, it's still hard on a person. And at first I was like, oh, I can do this, the independent woman. And I felt like I could, but being a part of your group and seeing so many people like me that I could relate to who were entrepreneurs, but who were taking mental health as a priority, who were willing to go to therapy. I said, you know what? I'm gonna try it. I was awarded one of those, and
Oh, you got
ever
one of those grants
since,
too. Oh, that's so good.
yes, and ever since I started going to therapy
Oh, that's
and talking
amazing.
about it. And that has been, I feel like that's why I haven't burned out.
That's so good. Like you're gonna make me cry. Like literally, my eyes are tearing up, man. That's amazing. Man, that's amazing in so many ways because in the Black community, you're talking about sickle cell being a stigma. Mental therapy is stigmatized in the Black community, and that's one of the things I love about this space is when we roll out opportunities to get mental therapy. That type form fills up like that. Because here we created a culture where we talk about that, we do it, we don't talk about it, we be about it. And so listening to you talk just there reminded me of something that Damon helped me think through. And I think I posted it in the community the other day. So, I have my Parents Making Profits podcast. And I'm going to do an episode about, you familiar with the quote, the man or the person in the arena, the Teddy Roosevelt quote? Are you familiar with that,
I
Al?
say it. You have to say it.
Well, it's super long, but it's about people who criticize the people who are fearlessly in the arena, busting their hump, doing their things, getting their face bloody, scratched up, beaten up, and the courage it takes to do that. So one of the things that I put together is I wanted to talk to people about like how are you showing up in the arena for your business, for your family, and for yourself. And I feel like you did start to answer some of that right there. And the way you are showing up, you just said for your business, for yourself, and for your family is because you're going to therapy, and it sounds like that's helping you.
Absolutely. It has
That's
been a
amazing.
game changer. And I think, you know, working for yourself, it is an all an all day thing. It's a lot of work because everything kind of falls on you. And as a mom, a wife, and a health advocate, a lot of things fall on my plate. And I just felt like therapy is I get a sense of freedom from therapy. It gives me an opportunity to take some of that weight off in a healthy way and be able to kind of focus where I need to focus. And so that's really been revolutionary. And I think, as a Black person, I'm always trying to find ways to find freedom and peace while here. And I think, I don't know how everybody else kind of shows up for themselves, but to me, that is crucial and critical to be able to make sure that I'm able to fulfill what I envision. So, as entrepreneurs, we are all visionaries. And if we want to be able to put our thoughts and our goals into reality, we have to know how to get rid of all the noise in our lives and be able to do that. And I've been in business since 2010, but there were some really challenging times in there, especially early on when I felt like this is too hard. It's easier for me to just be an introvert, be quiet, and hide. But when I decided to talk about it, to let it go, to have that sense of freedom, then I felt like, I can accomplish a whole lot more. This is just one aspect. And I've been able to grow my business and have other streams. We say in our community, you want to have multiple streams of income. And I've been able to do that because I think there's a lot of pressure on us as entrepreneurs, but
Yeah.
if you're feeling like you can only do this alone, then you're not going to be able to do it. You need to find
Mhm.
somebody. We have this community, but sometimes you got to find a professional to help you focus your life goals too. And I think therapy is one of those things that can help us with that.
100%. You got to put your oxygen mask on first, and we need the mental tools and resources in our toolkit to be able to do that, so we can show up to be good entrepreneurs, so we can show up and be a good parent, so we can show up and take care of ourselves in a healthy way. So important. So, I want to get to the stuff that you sell here, but before we do that, because you do so much and you give so much for so many, and it's so that comes through so brilliantly, and listening to you talk about this, what do you need? Like, so I'm going to replay, possibly all of this or some portion of it that you are comfortable with publicly to try to bring some awareness to the work you're doing. Anybody listening to this, like, what do you need to do this work more effectively?
So I showed you this particular book. This is a hardback book. I want this to be in our schools, in our libraries, all over the nation because sickle cell disease is all over. And
Yeah.
so I'm asking people, like a lot of libraries, you can request to have a book in your library. And so, this just saying, please make sure the library carries
The
ABCs of
school
sickle cell
library, the public
disease,
library, or both?
both. Both. So that is
Okay.
that is my goal because what happens is children who are living with this, they often feel so different, so isolated. But wouldn't it make a difference if you go to your school library and you just happen to see a book with a condition that maybe you're affected by it. It could be your parent affected by it. It could be, a sibling, but it is something that our children are living with. And the school system don't really understand how devastating it is. So parents are often really fighting for 504 plans. And I just feel like this is a simple way to educate the teachers, the other students, and family members. So that is my hope. And if people can request the book, if you want to purchase a book. Sometimes I have sickle cell organizations like they have summer camps, and sometimes they're saying, we get funding, but I have to use all that funding, to give scholarships to children to attend, and we don't have extra funds to buy your book. And while I would love to give away everything, y'all,
You can't. You
you
got
all
kids to
know you
feed. You
can't.
can't do that. You
You
can't do that.
cannot.
You
You
cannot.
cannot.
You absolutely cannot do that. So that's a nice segue into what I want to talk about next. Like, so you have books, you have merchandise. Like, can you tell us about your books, your shop? Like, where can people go to find it? And I'll be sure to, like, in the graphics, I'll put that up on the screen and stuff, and in the link so people can link to it. But how do they find your stuff? Or you want to drop it in the chat? Like, how can people, can you drop
So
a
my
link in the chat?
website is cleverlychanging.com. If you go to cleverlychanging.com/shop, you will find all of my merchandise. I sell books and, t-shirts and other different things that really help to raise awareness. But I always give a portion of the proceeds I give back to the organizations in the sickle cell community because they're working very hard. One of the things that I've kind of touched on where different sickle cell warriors, that's what we call the patients. We don't really like to call them patients because people are living with it for a lifetime. And even when they're not in the hospital, they're struggling with it. So we call them sickle cell warriors. Some of them are facing homelessness because they can't keep a job. Often your support system don't really understand. They don't always have an advocate in the family that can explain what's happening. People are like, this is weird. This is strange. You're always sick. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable talking about it because it can literally affect different parts of their body. So, sometimes marriages break up because of it. And so there are organizations all over the US. So I know many of us are entrepreneurs. We're thinking about, well, sometimes we have to write things off and we're looking for charities to give to. So I work with Cayenne Wellness Center in California. That's a charitable organization that is doing the work. I'm a part of the Sickle Cell Community Consortium. And that particular community, they help train advocates, they help train those who are doing the work on how to get grants, very much like what you do in this organization, but they do it for organizations that deal just with sickle cell disease. And it is phenomenal. So if you're looking for organizations that are really making a huge impact, I'm telling you, those are two organizations that are incredible that you can give to. And for the Sickle Cell Community Consortium, if you're specifically trying to help families who are struggling financially, earmark your gift for the Emergency Response Team, ERT. And that will help the families who are facing homelessness. Sometimes they don't have food to eat. They may be struggling to pay their utility bills. And, you would think that they could get social services, but here's the reality. Many of them have chosen not to have children. And a lot of times those social services are directly connected with whether or not you are a parent. And they are not all parents. And so I have such a big heart, but I'm one person. And so I like to partner with these organizations so that I have a bigger impact in my community. And for those
Yeah.
of you who are able to give, I encourage you to give to those organizations so
Yeah.
that you can have a tax write-off and it's actually helping real people who are going through it.
This is amazing. So I'm also going to share the replay of this video with, I don't know if you saw, I was on Karen Hunter's show this past week. I'm gonna share this with them because they do Wellness Wednesday, and they should have you on the show. Basically, they just need to replay this. But I'm gonna see if they would have you on the show to talk about this because most of her listeners, are black, and this is a problem in the black community, and they need to hear from you. Yeah, I'll send it to them. As a digression, though. So, all right. So we have about 5 minutes left. In the last 5 minutes, I just wanted to open it up and see if anybody had any questions for Elle. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Hey, I love the discussion and your advocacy, which is admirable and beautiful. What I was curious about is, are there statistics as far as if it's affecting certain portions more, and is that reflective of the resources that they have? Like my family's originally, and I'm originally from South Jersey. My family's originally from the hood, like the rougher side of Philadelphia called Camden. So it's right across the river from there. And I know there are folks that are being affected in those areas. Are they being affected more than, say, folks like yourself, where you and your partner are fortunate enough to have the resources? Like, do we have any stats as far as if they're being affected more in the hoods, more in places that don't have the resources? And what can we do about that? Yeah.
So let me speak to the statistics. Our states, and I mean all 50 states, have not done a good job with data collection. So often you'll hear the CDC quoting statistics like in the United States, sickle cell is considered a rare disease because it affects about 100,000 people in the US. That number is old because we do not have active data collection in all states that tell us how it's being affected. I'm in the state of Maryland. I'm in Prince George's County, and we have a program that is for the community members. And I know that it affects, you can like poll schools and things like that. So it is affecting people in those areas. But here's the thing, our representatives have not done a great job of giving money to the organizations so that they can do the data collection, so that they can meet the needs. So I mentioned, that our people are facing homelessness, food insecurity, just all of those things are much worse when you have a chronic illness because you're trying to get medications. Many people are able to get Medicaid and Medicare, but the problem is these medicines that are super expensive and the sickle cell medications are really expensive. My daughter was she was given a medicine that was like $70,000. And of
I'm
course,
sorry,
we had
a year?
insurance, so it
Was
cut
that
that cost.
was that a year or
It was
I'm sorry.
it was each like a 90-day supply, but we didn't have to
70
pay that.
stacks
I'm
for
sorry.
3 months?
70? I want to make sure I understand. Hold on now.
Yes.
That's $280,000 a year?
Yes, so we do have numbers. So like I know the numbers for the state of Maryland. Um, right now in the state of Maryland, there's about 5,000 based on what we know. We know that all people with sickle cell disease don't go to the hospital when they're in crisis. So again, these numbers are not completely accurate. But they believe that in the state of Maryland, there's about 5,000 people, and Prince George's County, which is a predominantly Black county, they have the largest population of sickle cell disease, but really we haven't done a great job of prioritizing this.
Mm, thank you.
Wow.
That is amazing.
Oh
Mm.
boy. Okay.
There are
Okay.
other books that I have, like I have a book for African American children. It's called Aaron Learns About Type 1 Diabetes. That's
Right.
another illness that affects our community. Type 1
Yeah.
diabetes is an autoimmune disease. Sometimes we don't really understand. We hear the word diabetes. It's juvenile diabetes, so it can affect a person at any age. But I want to say the reason why I'm bringing that up, if somebody has sickle cell trait or sickle cell disease, often when you do an A1C test, that number isn't going to be accurate. And so you actually have to get a blood test to determine your real, how your real blood glucose level over that 3-month period. So an
Yeah.
A1C isn't going to be the best determining factor because of sickle cell trait or sickle cell disease.
Okay. So Flo said she got the book and gave it to her daughter because her granddaughter has the trait. This has been amazing, Elle. Like I knew you were a boss, but you just like have exceeded my already super high expectations. And like I just got to think about how I can be helpful to help you advocate more and be more effective and sell more stuff so you could be a more effective entrepreneur and be a better parentpreneur, and so you could continue to have the flexibility and freedom you need so you could take care of your daughter who needs you, so importantly in some cases, right? At certain times. Okay, cool. So that's that. So thank you so much, Elle, for coming through and sharing that knowledge with us.